So, I'm going to grab this one. Oh, that's okay. So we're still in chapter 26. And I have a treat for those who like this. We're going to do 2 meditations today to make up for last week. And also we're going to do something a little different towards the end, is we're going to do a little bit more reading inside the text. That's made possible from the fact that we did most of the chapter yesterday, and since we have just a little bit at the end, we get to really delve into it. So I want to start by saying, really sharing how last week's chapter really guided me through my disappointment last week, because as some of you know, and I've shared with some of you, that my mom was supposed to come for my daughter's 3rd birthday celebration, and she was on the plane in the morning, and the flight kept getting delayed. Long story short, she wasn't going to make it before Shabbos. She had to deplane and not come. And I have since I'm little, I've identified one of my triggers is missed opportunities. It really can get under my skin when I start to think of if it, what could have been can really do me in. I start to feel like this is wrong, and it's so the chapter's message was about how everything that is given to us is a gift. And some we pray for and hope for the type of gifts that we can appreciate, that we have the taste for, that are enjoyable to us. Yet part of life is receiving gifts that actually come from a higher source that isn't filtered down into our, what's called in Kabbalah, kalim, or our sensors, our ability to appreciate. It's beyond our ability to appreciate, and therefore we feel pain. So I really tried to integrate that, and actually it really, really helped me separate the pain from this allowing myself to believe my thought that this is wrong. This is whatever's happening is wrong to me. And it should have been that she's here, and it could have been so perfect, which those thoughts came through. But I allowed myself to let them pass by, and it actually intensified the pain in the short term. I was like, you're forced to really focus on what it feels like versus what it's supposed to feel like. And then I was able to move through it much, much quicker. So I would love to meditate on that. If you'd like to actually open our class with a meditation, so we can all close our eyes and we can all think about something that is causing you pain. Maybe it's something that happened in the past that every time you think about it, it causes you pain. Or maybe it's something that's ongoing. There's no shortage of pain, so I'm sure. So we like to avoid these feelings of pain, but let's allow ourselves to go there. Where do you feel it? Is it a physical sensation? Where do you feel it in your body? Focus on just the sensation of the pain. You might notice thoughts come up, urging you to analyze the situation, why this is happening, what did you do wrong, what did others do wrong, how it came to be, or how to get out of it. Allow these thoughts to come and to go. Allow your pain to be felt for what it is. Pain. Maybe visualize the pain as a ray of light, so bright and so strong, leading all the way up to a light too bright for your eyes to behold. Maybe it's a line, like almost like a laser beam. This light is pure love for you. Allow yourself to accept the light and its mystery. You don't understand it, but you breathe through its blinding brightness. Maybe you can find comfort in the magnitude of its source that is so much bigger than you. Check in with your pain. How does it feel inside your body? Has it shifted? Has it moved? Is it stronger? Is it weaker? How do you feel? When you feel ready, you can open your eyes, but allow the process to fully process. It can take longer or shorter. Try to pay attention to the movement. It's interesting because the analogy of light and the pain is actually brought in the chapter. It's on the first page of the printout. And today we have the chapter, basically the last 3 pages of the chapter in order, so it actually has a flow, which is nice. So in Kabbalah, there's this idea of the sun coming out, being in a protective case, and it coming out of its sheath. As a child, my reference point for this idea is what they taught us in the story of Abraham. Every story of the Torah has multiple planes, and there's the simple understanding from the basic text of the Bible, but then along with it comes the oral tradition, which has so many layers and richness. So part of this oral tradition is the Midrash, which is like the fabulous stories that come along with the central story. And part of the Midrash says that Abraham was just circumcised himself, and he was in pain, and he usually liked to have guests over, but Hashem wanted him to rest, so he took the sun out of its case so that it was extra hot outside, so nobody would be traveling. And I'm not going to say it's in Rashi, but I think it might be. So, and then the story goes that Abraham came out anyways because he wasn't fazed by the heat, and that's in the story of the 3 angels came and blessed him for the child. So that's my reference point for this idea of the sun in its case. But in this situation, or in this case, the Tanya says on the very top two paragraphs of the chapter that this idea that the sun representing godly energy, and it's usually filtered energy. This is a theme that we keep coming back to. It's filtered energy, which means the sun is in its protective case and we get a minute fraction of the sun's light. And that's how the earth is not burned up by the sun on a physical sense, but in a spiritual sense, whether or not maybe this case is the ozone layer. However you want to interpret the physical aspect, the spiritual aspect is what we're going to focus on. The spiritual aspects of God's spirituality being tempered by filters. And us as humans, in our existence is made possible by the filtered light, that we're not burned up, or nullified. So this idea of the pain and the coming from unfiltered light fits in, and it talks about the righteous people, how the righteous people take pleasure. They're really tuned in to the truth of the matter. They're really tuned into spirituality more so than most people. And they really, really take pleasure in this unfiltered light. And so that when the Midrash goes on to say that when Mashiach comes, when we have the Messianic era, the sun will be taken out of its case. So it won't just be the sun that we sometimes get unfiltered light. It will be completely out of its case. And the righteous people will relish in it. So this idea of this light is kind of where I got this idea from, this understanding, a visualization of this idea. And it also says because they've aligned themselves with this unfiltered light, they won't be burned up by it when it's taken out of its case. What about the rest of us? Well, that will be a process. Yeah. And actually, it really aligns with the Jewish perspective on punishment, that being the truth of the matter being the pain in and of itself. When we're faced with the truth of the consequences of our actions, right? That the truth hurts. That's the idea of the sun coming out of its sheath and being really, really hard for us to handle that. That would be maybe talks about that being a cleansing process for those who weren't already aligned. So that's a little Kabbalistic nugget that we could have actually skipped over it and continued to understand the idea, but I found it really interesting, so I decided to share it. Okay. Now, all this, does anybody have anything to share at this point before we move on to a totally adjacent topic, but different? Maybe some reflections on this idea of pain and moving through it and the judgment of the pain, light, unfiltered light, anything to share or questions?
Do we need to face that unfiltered pain in order to progress to a purer state?
That's a really good question. I think it's really what you make of it. It's happening, it's tuning into a consciousness. So it's always this, the goodness of the pain that's happening may be true. The question is, are we able to appreciate it, or are we able to tap into it, or maybe not? And that's kind of relates to what we were talking about last week with the difference between our pain and others' pain. Mm-hmm. Is our pain, that's our work. Other people's pain, it's only appropriate to support the plane of the plane of understanding or experience that is painful. That's our job, to provide that cushion for those around us when they are suffering, and in a way hold them in their work and make it almost possible for them to do their work. When we hold each other with just empathy, without any judgment of why that might be happening to them or why it's really good for them that's happening, that's really, really not appropriate. It's really, that's when we provide that safe space, it actually enables those people to then find that on their own. And it's not a charade. It's not a charade like, oh, I really know why that's happening to you, but I'm just going to hold that back. Not at all. It's both. They're both true. The experience of suffering and the experience and the maybe awareness of something beyond that is both correct. It's just, which altitude are you at? So when it's other people, we stay here. Because the truth of the matter is that we have no idea why that's happening to them. Even if we think we know, we don't know, because we won't become privy to somebody else's, with insight to somebody else's suffering. It's not our business. The only person that can work through their own suffering is themselves, with the guidance and support of those around them. Does that make sense? So I don't know that, I don't know, to answer your question, but really not answer is I don't really know. I don't really know. I do know that when I have approached different painful things with this awareness, for example, with my mother or whatever, not coming, it's a good example because thank God it's a first world problem. I mean, I was just reading a historical novel about how it took them months to travel to occasions, like months, right? And they would travel to weddings and stuff, and they would take 3 months out of their life to attend a wedding. It boggled my mind, right? So it's a first world problem. But nevertheless, it was painful. And yes, I was able to appreciate more and be more centered because I had this attitude. It helped me. Yet, if I wasn't able to access it, I suppose that would be a different journey. Maybe a little bit harder, actually.
So if you were to see someone very close to you, a sister, a child of yours, in pain, and you have an idea why, is it your job just to nurture them, to enable them to do what they need to do? Or if you think you know what's causing or some of it, to nudge them?
I think it depends on the closeness of your relationship, for starters. And I think to me...
It's a very good question.
Yeah.
To ask.
Yeah, it's a very good question. To me, it depends on an invitation. And it could be like, if somebody's very evolved, they might say, please help me through this, and that does happen. But usually it's something more subtle. So it really takes an attunement to figure out, and especially as parents, we know what we know what this is. It's like we lead with compassion, but then maybe there's an opening for a suggestion, right? But definitely leading with compassion. I think we can all look back to an experience where someone tried to help us without this leading and with compassion, and it usually backfires. Yeah. So this was part 1 of chapter 26, which is about how we approach pain with basically the comfort that it's not in our control, that we are receivers. And by relinquishing control, by relinquishing the worry of this is going to be terrible for me, right? That's how we approach it. But what happens when the pain is because of something that we did or something that we could have done better? Is that any different? So the first part is about things that happen to us, and we approach it as gifts given to us. But what about things that we have generated with our freedom of choice? So let's read. Well, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is this sadness? Being sad about your shortcomings, being sad about something that you've done, a mistake you've made, a really bad judgment call. Does it help? Is it a good thing to feel sad, negative feelings about that, or is it a positive thing? Let's grapple with this.
I don't think I think your feelings aren't necessarily, I don't know why you would judge them as good or bad. I think they inform you, and you have to feel them and accept that you're feeling a certain way.
Mhm.
And then it can inform you when you maybe you realize, I'm sad because I made a mistake and I'm sad about it. So then what? Then
That's beautiful.
you move forward.
What would be yes, and that's going. This idea will lead us in our conversation. And what would be more worrisome if somebody had the feelings, or if somebody didn't have the feelings?
They didn't have.
Right? We're talking about a sociopath, right? We worry more if somebody's not having feelings of regret or sadness or remorse after they've slipped up. Yet, is it always, is there, let me put it this way. Do we celebrate the feeling as a goal? Like, yes, it's a good thing you're feeling sad, right? But yes, you made it. You are feeling sad. Sadness, amazing, right? In some cultures, actually, sadness is very praised. But what does the Tanya say about sadness? So let's actually look into the words, and we're going to have the text guide us in our study today. So it's right after that break, and still the first page. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to discuss a different type of sadness that's caused by one's failings in the matters of the spirit. As for sadness connected with heavenly matters, one must seek ways and means of freeing oneself from it. In other words, can you fix it or can you not? In the first part of the chapter, we can't fix it. We do what we can to fix it, but the sadness is coming from the things we can't fix. And that's when we welcome acceptance. But what about the things that are in our control? The Alter Rebbe is saying, use this information to inform you to fix it. So, but now let's talk about how. What if we're in the middle of praying? What if we're in the middle of a phone call? What if we're in the middle of a coffee date with a friend? What if we're in the middle of shopping or doing a business deal? And all of a sudden this feeling of sadness, oh my God, what did I just say? Is that helpful, I should say? Is that helpful to now stop everything and say, wait a minute, I'm feeling sad. And you start to feel really sad and really think into it. So, the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us that it's real time and place is critical in navigating this sadness and remorse that we feel because we are empathetic human beings and care. So, is it a good thing we are feeling sadness? Well, yes. We're happy that we have a beating heart. How are we going to use our beating heart and navigate it and channel it in a productive way? So, let's go back to the text. This applies to the time of one's divine service okay, so wait a minute. Before we read, the Alter Rebbe is going to say that pretty much a rule that any time a sad thought comes in the middle of life, it's a trap. It's an actual trap. So let's break this down. Let's imagine it. Let's imagine that I had this conversation with my sister, and I said some things that were I did something to hurt my sister. And right now I am in the middle of let's think of a good example.
Teaching this class.
I'm in the middle of teaching this class. Perfect. Thank you. And all of a sudden it just hits me. I'm like, oh my God, what did I say to her? Before I didn't think it hurt her, but now I'm like, all of a sudden I'm given this like awareness of how she might have experienced that comment. And I'm like, oh, I hurt her. Oh my God. So what if I continue to think about it and continue, or maybe I was about to teach the class. Maybe I'm not in the middle of teaching the class. I'm about to teach the class, right? And I'm like, and all of a sudden I'm feeling like, ooh, I did that. And it's just, what happens?
Drops your whole energy level, your mental state of focus, everything
crashes. And then, is that going to help me teach the Tanya class?
No.
Is that going to even help me approach my sister? Right? So it becomes a negative cycle. You know, where there's a cycle of what is called the virtuous cycle, and the there's a word for it, and it's a negative cycle. So we're familiar with like when we numb our feelings, right? All of a sudden we have this negative feeling and we say, oh, that just we start to read into it and think into it, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and then we just go get the ice cream, and then then we feel even worse about ourselves, so then we do it again, and then, binge eating, addiction. Where does that all come from? It all comes from these intrusive thoughts that come into our head, and we buy into it. So the Alter Rebbe is giving us a little bit of a trick. He's like, anytime that you're in the middle of doing something in your life and these thoughts come up, it's a trap. What you need to do is make an appointment. So they're information for you. Something needs to be dealt with. You say, oh, I see you. I'm going to make an appointment to feel that feeling a little bit later, because right now I've got something to do. And we all know that I love this, do the best you can with what you have, and when you have more, do better. I didn't say it perfectly, but the idea remains, right? And I think that that's a similar idea. It really has guided me in my life when I feel, again, that trigger that I feel with missed opportunity or remorse about, like, I could have, and I'm just like, what? Or, remorse, doing something wrong. And I'm like, what will help me be a better mom going forward? Because, of course, as a mom, a lot of it's about that. And it's like, well, just being better starting now is usually what helps channel me in, like, just anchor me and be like, okay, that was really bad. Okay, that really, really was bad. I'm going to make an appointment to, deal with fixing whatever triggers, whatever stimulus and, insight and how that affected maybe some resentment that I have there. We're going to make an appointment to work all that through. But right now, what's ahead of me? There's time. But right now, right, I'm not going to let myself fall into the trap. And let's read that inside. So this applies to the time of one's divine service. Is the fact that this applies to one's divine service is self-evident, because, in other words, if you're in the middle of praying and you have these thoughts, because we're supposed to serve God with joy, so not the time and place. It's like we're talking to God, right? That's fine, but like this is your meeting with God. How do you want to, let's stay focused. If you haven't finally you waited a very long time to have a meeting with government to talk about something on your work permit or something, you want to start a business or whatever it is, and you're there, like, that's not how you want to lead the conversation. Okay, so that's self-evident. But even one who is occupied in business and worldly affairs, should there descend upon him any sadness or anxiety about heavenly matters during his business affairs, it is certainly a trick of the evil inclination, which saddens him, ostensibly for spiritual reasons, in order to lure him afterward into lusts, God forbid, as it is known. So in order to lure him into the negative cycle, which with numbing pain and then feeling worse about ourselves, and then numbing even that and then feeling worse about ourselves, that's the trick. So the evil inclination is called the Yetzer Hara. And we're taught that the Yetzer Hara, there's a lot of Yiddish statements, Hebrew statements, is Bista Kluger. It's the Yiddish word for he's smart. He's not stupid. One thing the evil inclination is stupid, right? So the evil inclination can come to us potentially and say, make this choice and ruin your life. Or destroy your relationship with your mother. You may buy into it, but what it's more likely to do is try with some more low-hanging fruit. Because if you're in clear brain, if you're running along your life, you're probably not going to be fazed by go destroy a relationship with your best friend. It's like, no, thank you. I do not want to do that. But what the Yetzer Hara does do is like, hey, what you said to your mother the other day, that was pretty much destroying your relationship with her.
Would you say tempting?
Yes. So much of our work is calling out the distractions, the noise, and staying focused. And it's work because it doesn't come clear straight out and being like, oh, do negative things. No, it doesn't come that way. It comes dressed up in virtuous sadness. Oh, look how good you are that you feel so sad about your interaction the other day. You look how much empathy you have. Look how much caring. You see, and it's like, yeah, let's get sad about it. So it dresses up in distracting negative downward pulling, right? We talk about I don't know much about this, but I'm seeing the language of higher frequency emotions, lower frequency emotions going down, energy, or what is it? Higher frequency, lower. So I feel like that's applicable, right? It wants to bring us down to lower frequency.
Lowest common denominator.
Because it knows that that's where it's going to more likely succeed in its devious mission. And of course, there's a whole other topic of why it exists in the first place, and we have talked about that. But does anybody feel the need to get into that, or?
Well, I'm curious.
Yeah.
In therapy, I've learned about the monkey brain. Is
Mm-hmm.
that a little bit of what we're talking about? Your monkey brain is
Chattering.
you're ruminating, you're thinking about negative things, you're worried, and it serves absolutely a negative purpose.
Precisely.
Right? It gets you unfocused, and how do you get out of that cycle? So I'm curious what the Rebbe's would say about why that even is there.
Yeah. So that is the question, why it's there. It's there. It always boils down to the challenge of life. So without we're taught that with every positive energy, there exists a mirroring negative energy to make it challenging for us. So actually, I'm skipping ahead, like in like 2 chapters, but the more, it's actually a good sign when you feel resistance to something. It's almost like when you're starting a business, right? Or starting a new business, starting a new venture. And the more it scares you, the more go there, right? So it's like the more we're on the right track, the more the Yetzer Hara is going to be like, no, don't do it, or have self-doubt, imposter syndrome, whatever it is, that's going to, right? To make it work, because otherwise life wouldn't be work, and that God designed our life to be work. But then of course there's like, free lunch versus when you earn it. So you can understand it that way, where it's like, if you get free lunch, you may appreciate it this much, but if you really, 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 really worked for that lunch, you're going to appreciate it this much. And so it's a principle, the way that the nature of the world was built in, that the more we work for the Lefum Tzara Agra, the more we put effort into it, the more is the reward. It doesn't mean that it will go better necessarily. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but the result will be so much more fulfilling when it comes as the result of work and effort. So it's kind of a construct of the universe that we have resistance to things that are positive. And the monkey brain is part of that resistance. It tries to get you away from what you really know, or what you really trying to figure out what you need. Sometimes you need help figuring it out, but it's trying to help take it away from what you need to focus on.
So prayer is like meditation.
Prayer is a conversation, actually.
Okay.
It's a conversation with God. It can be very meditative, but actually a lot prayer as a result of meditation is really where it's at. A lot of the Hasidic masters would meditate for hours before even starting to pray. That's not to mean that you can meditate through prayer, right? It can be like, as you're doing it, you're like, wow, and you're thinking into the words you're saying, and it's meditative. But it's actually a conversation with God.
So you're more focused on that specific and having a conversation with God as opposed to letting go of whatever.
Yes, but I do find that, let's say the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur prayers, like I do find that when I am really tuning into the words I'm saying to God, it's a feedback loop. It's like, oh, I'm letting go. Like God really is king. He really is ruling the universe. Like, and I am part of it. And, so a lot of it's meditative.
Well, I think it's interesting that this chapter keeps talking about, and then when you're praying, he's sort of saying don't be sad or don't let those monkey brain thoughts in, right?
Yes.
Like he says, whether the depression
stay focused
upon him during his service of God in Torah study or prayer when he's not engaged thus but with his material prayer, this is what we should consider. Now is not the proper time for genuine sadness, nor even for worry over grave sins, God forbid. So, now is the time to have this conversation with God, not be thinking
and show up as you are.
And have compassion for
Right.
yourself.
Right, and that boils down to I am enough, right? I am enough as I am. And all the you're not good enough, that's distraction. That's a trap. That's to get you into a negative cycle. Actually, it's a little bit more discussed in the next week's chapter. We're going to talk about shame. This is more sadness and remorse. Next week is shame. So it's more of the same, but just even more intensive in this conversation.
It's very powerful to postpone this emotion of sadness and to keep it for when you actually are praying, because this is when you can transcend and have the proper conversation. No, is it not how I understand?
So prayer, it has a few parts of it. There's the verses of praise, and then there's then when you're talking to God and you can't. Prayer does have asking for forgiveness in it. And at that time, it would be remorseful to have a certain measure of sadness. But I don't think it's talking about feeling the words you're saying. I think it's talking about the monkey brain. It's talking about you're not good enough. You are ruminating on something you've done in the past that isn't the past, right? And you're having this conversation now, and it says, it comes as to start to notice as you go about life, and it's really not only in prayer. It's like the Alter Rebbe said, it's in life. When something comes in as a pop, that's how you know it's the Yetzer Hara. That's how you know it's the monkey brain, the distraction. When we're taught we have set aside times. You started to read it. Thank you. So we're up to, when do we have these times? So in our tradition, it's optional. It's up to you. It's personal. The traditional common times that people would choose or people can choose is usually once a week. During the bedtime Shema is a really good time. Right before the bedtime Shema, there's actually a paragraph in the bedtime Shema for these types of. There's one for forgiveness. There's one for I'm sorry. And once a week, once a month by Rosh Chodesh, once a year before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is a huge time for this type of introspection, stock taking. It doesn't look or feel like, I did that. It's more like, okay, let's think about how I'm doing. Let's think about how I'm doing in this aspect, in this area. Doing a self-evaluation. If this pop into your head is really an item for self-evaluation, it will come up in your self-evaluation. But you might find that it actually doesn't come up because it was actually noise the whole time. So if it's really, really valid, it will wait for you. And it's always I use that to myself. I've used this advice to my sisters. I'll be like, just relax right now. Your problems are going to wait for you. I promise you they'll be there for you when you're ready for them, right? It's easier said than done. But your shortcomings and the work that you need to do in your shortcomings will wait for you when it's the right time. If it's not going to be there in the right time, it means it was a smokescreen.
So Judaism would say we should set aside a time.
Yes.
Judaism would say go to therapy.
Therapy is a good time.
There are so many Jewish therapists.
Therapy is a very good time for this,
Yes.
right? And that's exactly the perfect embodiment of like, you have this time, and like, you know, I've been in therapy, and it's such a gift, right? You have these things that happen in your day, and it really just gives you that ability. It's a shameless plug. It will really give you, gives you a time, like permission to let go of the stuff during the week, because I knew like, I'm having therapy, I'm going to talk about everything,
Exactly.
right? So you don't even need, and sorry, I have to say with apologies to you and to all the therapists in the world that I love so much, you don't even need a therapist to do this.
Sure.
You can actually do it for yourself. It's more fun and more, therapist, extremely helpful, but if you don't have the ability, if you haven't found the right match, if you don't have the funds, you can still make an appointment with yourself for self-reflection. Don't forget to bring your self-compassion along, though. We will talk about, actually, we will meditate with that. Okay, so actually we're right here at the meditation. Before we started, let me make sure I didn't forget anything.
Can I just ask, there just seems to be a little confusion for me.
Sure.
Earlier we were saying, this applies to the time of one's divine service. This applies to the time of one's divine service is self-evident, for one must serve God with joy and gladness of heart. But then, later it says, since a genuine sadness is an expression of love or fear of God, it should express itself at a time when these emotions are active, during prayer, Torah study, and the like. So, to me, that feels contradictory. Do we serve God with only joy and gladness of heart, or are we allowed to bring that genuine sadness and see it as an expression, as it says, as an expression of love or fear of God, and express that during prayer, Torah study, etc.?
That is the question that is actually going to bring us to the next idea. So thank you. So sadness, it depends if it's true sadness. If it's monkey brain sadness, it's unhelpful. When is it true sadness? True sadness it's true sadness when it brings you to joy after you've moved through it. True sadness feels very different than monkey brain sadness. Monkey brain sadness is more, I would say, more depression, actually, or anxiety.
Yeah.
Versus the real sadness, which actually in the Tanya is described as bitterness. Yeah, mariros, bitterness, like maror. So this chapter is actually about separating the two and saying, don't be distracted by the anxiety and depression thoughts and ideas and feelings that are coming through. Call them out and stay focused. Make an appointment to deal with all those things that are coming up. If they're real, then they will stick around and wait for you to work through. If they are not real, if they don't come back, then they were never real. If they do come back, you'll work with them.
But you work with them through prayer, or no? Because that's where I'm getting confused. Okay,
no, not the classic way. I'm not going to say that prayer never helps you work through them. That's a big statement. But the Alter Rebbe is actually saying, like we were talking about before a little bit, we're differentiating prayer as a conversation and working through your sadness as more of outside meditation, without a script. I'm sure there are scripts. Actually, the Tanya, this is a script. We're going to use the Tanya, as the last few lines of the Tanya, as a meditation, because I was reading, I'm like, this is a meditation. So I'm going to help guide you through this. We're going to try it out. What happens in your appointment? Okay. We're going to do an appointment now. Okay. We're going to make an appointment to deal with our sadness. So everybody, let me just make sure. Okay. All right. My printout didn't print everything. So here we are. Okay. So everybody close your eyes. And we're actually not going to think about something that we have done wrong. If something is fresh in your mind, go ahead and find it. Find something that you feel sad about. But what we're not going to do is meditate about your feeling of sadness. We are in fact going to meditate about Hashem, about the greatness of God. What we focus on, we get more of. So let's talk about Hashem. He created the entire world. And you are in it, in this vast universe with intricate nature systems, myriads of details, all interdependent. And he's simultaneously aware of every detail. And you. And he knows you. Hashem is vastly good and identifies you as good. He loves you and he likes who you are. Now come back to that sadness, the mistake that you found there. And now meditate. We're going to meditate on a broken heart. Imagine yourself, feel a broken heart. You're heartbroken that you feel disconnected from Hashem, the great Hashem, who is both beyond you and within you and sees you and loves you, and you're disconnected. You're disconnected from who you really are. What does it feel like? Is there a ripping sensation? Is there bitterness? Where does it feel physically? Maybe you visualize an image of disconnection. Maybe you visualize a sense of being out of alignment with who you really are. Now, think of Hashem again. As Rav Lisloach. He should believe with perfect faith that God has erased his sins and he pardons abundantly. The same God that is infinitely good, the definition of your good that you disconnected from, is the same God that is right here with you, waiting for you to come back. He knew you would come back. He never stopped loving you. It is you that stepped out of alignment. And now that you have realigned, you can see that he is right here the whole time with his infinite love for you. Notice the emotion that you feel now. Is it peace? Maybe it's joy that you found yourself again, your true self. This knowledge that God has surely cleansed him of his sins is the true joy in God which follows the sadness, as explained above. Simcha amitit, true joy. And with this joy, know that you have arrived and you were here the whole time. Can you open your eyes?
Excuse me.
Yes. This is the Tanya's meditation. I read the words. Yeah. You can find it in the last four. Starting from the words, so that thereby his heart will truly be rent with genuine bitterness. And I find it refreshing and incredible and brilliant. I find it brilliant the way that the Tanya leads the meditation, not with you and how bad you are and how imperfect and how far from perfect and sadness. It's not about you, it's about Hashem. Because what we're doing is, like we said before, whatever we focus on, we get more of. So it's not a trick, it's true. We are good. What we need to do is simply realign with the good. It's like when we educate kids, right? Notice all the kids that are sitting in their chair, right? I like the way that David is sitting. I like the way that, and all the kids are like, oh, all right, we're doing that, right? Versus calling out the negative behavior. So we do that for ourselves. We call out the positive. We call out who we are. Then we start to feel, I wasn't operating from that space. So it feels bitter. And then we get back into alignment. And that real sadness is the real sadness that when you feel it all the way out through to the end, how did it feel for you?
I'm trying to find examples in my life where this sadness became joy. And I'm not seeing it. Like I'm searching it just for a couple of minutes, but I've been trying to really think, when did a sadness turn into a joy?
Remember, it's not the sadness of things happening to you, right? It's sadness about things, or bitterness, or regret of things that you've done imperfectly. Maybe start now noticing areas where you can bring this meditation in and see how it leads you.
Yeah. So I think it's the self-compassion part. Like, if God loving you is the same as having self-compassion.
Yes, it is.
You loving yourself and saying, and those moments when you can forgive yourself for your shortcomings or something. In therapy, what I've learned is the sadness was not my fault. Things happened that, of course, a person's going to be sad about. There's loss, there's yearning, there's I wish it could have been, expectations not met, etc., etc.
That's more the first part of the chapter.
Okay,
Yeah.
of things happening to you.
Yes.
But then you internalize this sadness and you carry it with you,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes a thing.
Mm-hmm. again, that's also still the first part of the
Yeah.
chapter, which is the acceptance, which is beautiful, and it's a huge part of therapy. There's also the part of it, but you were also touching on the second part as well, which is the compassion, which is like not internalizing this is who I am. That's shame.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. That's,
Right.
I'm glad
Yeah.
you said that. I've been thinking about that this whole time. The difference between guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Like I did something wrong or bad versus I am something wrong or
Mhm.
bad. And so, yeah, is that what you're saying is the difference between the first part and the second part of it?
Yeah, I think it's really touched on, and it's going to be expanded in next week's chapter. This idea of shame, it's
Shame is bad.
shame is not helpful.
That
Shame is not
I am
helpful
bad.
in both psychology and the Tanya. But how do we work through real shortcomings? Like we don't want to be a sociopath, right? So the Tanya is taking us through a meditation where we can address our shortcomings, but not from a place of shame, from a place of self-value, that we value ourselves as our inner, the real good, that who we really are, and we just need to come back into alignment with that.
What I was riffing off of is what you just said, which is where I have felt joy from sadness is through self-compassion and finding that I can love myself, forgive myself, and then there's joy.
That is exactly what the meditation is all about. And I have felt it. I have felt remorse and yucky feelings. And then meditating on, wait, but who am I? This is about who am I? And you can feel into who I really am. I'm a good person, right?
Right.
And
I
that
am
self-compassion, and I
lovable,
really,
right.
and of course, like, you know, it's not really related to, but in therapy you'll talk about, like you mentioned, like all the things that came into play. In other words, you're not a bad person. You slipped up, and there were reasons why you slipped up. So you have that self-compassion, but the whole, what's more productive? What's going to get us back into alignment? Focusing on how I'm really a mess. Like I have not been following any tools. I have been on the floor, just not. I do not have my life together, and look how dysfunctional I am as a human being. Right? Is that going to lead me to function? Like, is that going to lead me to more integration and regulation? No.
And not joy.
Definitely not joy.
No.
And we know from the beginning of chapter 26 that we lead with joy because joy is productive. Joy gets us going. So what's going to help be productive is it I'm this dysfunctional, or is I am a good person? The core of my being is good. It's godly. And I feel bitter that I haven't been in alignment with that. But then after you feel, remember, you're letting yourself feel the bitterness. There is part of that. But then you're also seeing that it's not what defines you. And you're back. And you're like, and then you can realign, ching, oh, okay. And it brings us back to like what we talked about in the beginning of this class, which is like, okay, do the best you can with what you have, and when you have more, do better, right? So now I've got more. Now I'm realigned. I can do better now.
Well, and I was going to ask, like, why does God readily forgive over and over, like repeatedly? And then also, like it says, as though you had sinned for the first time. But then with your question, I was thinking about the inner child and like inner child work, and how sometimes we have to look at those parts of ourselves as children who didn't know or didn't get what they need, or when we were children we didn't know and didn't get what we needed. And this line about God doing that for us makes me feel like that's God is doing the inner work.
Well, we are
child work
children.
with us.
See,
Yeah.
because God sees himself as a parent.
I wrote God as parent, and then helping us
That's beautiful.
be with our own inner child.
He sees us as children, right? And so he's holding us as children. That's why he's always forgiving. He's like a parent is always forgiving. It may not happen immediately, but you're always going to forgive, right? God is our parent. He sees us. He knows our child. He knows how we're wired. He's the one who created it. He loves, he's right. He's always going to forgive us. He's parenting us. Go on. Yeah, Shelley, what were you saying?
My point was just to make it clear that it is, I do not find an example of where something I felt the sadness, I managed to work through it and feel the joy. Like
That's what I wanted
the
to
change
say.
of perspective from the same event. I feel, maybe you feel differently, but I feel I can have the sadness for something and then it just goes back to neutral and then something else will bring me joy. Not the
Very good,
connection, you see, of the two events. Like the sadness disappears by itself,
Yes.
kind of,
Mhm.
then it's gone. Then I'm neutral again, and something else will bring me joy. But this, or maybe I get something wrong, it's the link between the sadness and the joy in the same event, or
Yeah.
thought, or
That's difficult.
feeling.
Yeah.
That's what I
Shelley,
was-
go ahead and then they'll
What I
address.
was
Yeah.
going to say is, I've been trying to hold on to them
Yes.
because everybody's raising really
Mm.
interesting and valid points. Katja, for me, I find if we were to use that phraseology from sadness to joy, for me that would work through learning more and gaining wisdom on how to make that situation clearer to me and learn from it. That brings me joy. So I can look back and say that was a really difficult period, but I understand where it came from, hence the self-compassion, but I also am learning how to deal with that issue. And that brings me joy, the learning.
Okay.
Empowered.
It is a good perspective, but it's
And I'll
not
also
at the
add
same
to it.
time, right?
I'll add to it more immediately. Yes, and I think that's more when you have perspective of time, it gives you that ability to see that principle. You can start to attune your senses to appreciate it even in more immediate, in the moment. Actually, I have experienced. It's like when you have a fight with somebody, and then you work it out, and there's that sense of relief, right? But even before the relief that you get from the outside relationship, from the interaction being worked out with the other person, before that, if you take the time to really feel into yourself and say, where did I go wrong here? And then you realign with yourself, finding yourself is the joy.
Okay. That is different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finding
I
your
like
true
that. That is
self.
very powerful.
Yes.
Yeah, realigning with yourself
Yes.
is the joy
Yes.
after being thrown out of alignment.
Yes, and then you have all that shame that comes up in that out of alignment period, and when you find that joy, it's like, here I am again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is very powerful.
Mm.
Very.
And exciting.
Yeah.
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 It's
Very
been
enlightening.
Thrilled. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got